All right, so welcome again. We're going to be doing the second tier, as I mentioned. So we did tier 1 last time, which was the sky. Now we're doing the land. Again, I promise you, it's so much easier from here. Maybe the water will be a little bit weird. This one's not as weird. So the second tier, which is the land, is the realm of which mankind rules on, right? It's the landkind that we are given dominion to be God's image bearers, and it's also the place of the beasts of the field, the creeping insects, domestic animals. We kind of share this domain together. And then you also have some interesting animals that cross sections, which was kind of weird, which is why they're kind of emphasized in the plagues, like the frogs. One, there's dealing with Egyptian cosmology and their gods. But two, a frog is a water creature that's infringing on land, but also it's a land creature. So it's this weird, like, chaos thing that's happening here. And it's a lot of weird, fun stuff. But this is our domain, land creatures. Like I said, day 6 is when we were given this, but also day 5 was also given to the land animals. Waters were covering it before. If you read day 3, actually when we turn there now, Genesis 1, we see that in day 3, the waters are given a command in the first half. So what do we have here? We have the water that is presently there. What's interesting is on day 2, you have the fact that the water is not called good when it's separated yet. But then you have the completion of the task of the waters in day 3. We can get to a whole nother conversation about that. But the waters are still being worked on when we get to the third day. On the third day, we see that the waters are being told to move over so the land can appear. It's not like, hey, water move, and then poof, land. It's waters are covering this earth, and then the water is told to move so the earth can be there. Is this emphasis that is then played out again in the flood, because the waters do what? They recover the land. It's not the land just disappear. The waters recover everything. The water above and the water below basically cleanse everything out. They go back to the status it was before the first day. And so on this third day, God says, waters, scoot, and here's your spot. We see this also in the Psalms when they give their own version of creation accounts. They say, you gave the water their boundaries. You told them where to go, where not to go. Same thing with Job, where God tells Job, I told everything where they're supposed to be, where they're not supposed to cross. This is their boundaries. Because if the waters are covering land, well, we don't have a place to live. And God is creating everything, but his ultimate desire seems to be that he has human beings to be the ones that he shares his relationship with, to be the ones that represent him here on earth. We also have the fact that there are mountains, but the mountains here are viewed in some ways that we saw last week as like a tent pole holding up this metal thing, that the rakia, that is described as holding back this chaos water. That's we discussed last week. That is theologically the same as God's way of protecting us from chaos, because he separated things. He's put things in order so we can live and continue in order, but also see that he is a God of order, because things were in a state of inhabitants and chaos. But then also you would ascend to the mountain if you were to go convene with the gods. Your best examples of this would be Moses with the burning bush, but also when he went to Mount Sinai, he's frequently told to climb mountain. One of my favorite instances, I think, is Exodus 19, is actually you have the angel of the Lord, where it says Yahweh tells Moses to climb the mountain to talk to Yahweh, because he will give you instruction, but Yahweh's down here. And you have Yahweh telling Moses to go meet Yahweh up there to talk about things, and he's not talking about himself. It's weird. But you also have Ezekiel. What does he do? He climbs the mountains to discuss things. What does Jesus do for the transfiguration? He ascends the mountain. Who's meeting him there? Moses and Elijah. Ignore that right there. But they meet him up there to discuss the things that are happening, to talk about what he's about to do. At least that's what the gospel authors say. They talk about the things he's about to accomplish. And there's this interesting thing where the apostles who are there with him are seeing that he's on this mountain, and he's talking to these prophets who are known for climbing the mountain to talk to God, and then God speaks saying, this is my son, but they're talking to him. So it's like pointing to Jesus as God, and there's the Father saying, this is my son because I'm God, and this is my son. It's just weird, wild stuff of the Trinity where they ascend the mountain with God to meet with the first person of the Trinity, God. So Eretz is the Hebrew word, but Eretz simply means land. We tend to translate it as earth, and earth in this case means the dirt of the ground, the where we come from. Human beings are described as being made from the dust of the ground, made from the dirt below. This is where we come from. This is our home. Yeah, this is how we translate this as earth. We often, though, come into it reading it immediately thinking, okay, it's talking about the planet. which in one sense you can still make that argument. On the other sense, the planet itself also contains water, atmosphere, so it's a little almost cosmologically incorrect to kind of just slap down our planet onto it, just because it doesn't necessarily encapsulate that as a word itself. It primarily just means land. So like you'll find that it will say the land is this or the land is that. It'll say when he wiped out the whole earth, saying that he wiped out the whole land, which doesn't hurt the whole flood thing if you're a global flood person, because there's more water than land anyways, so the land would just be wiped out by water. But the Earth itself does not necessarily mean a globe. It's referring to the land below them, because they don't know what a globe is yet. The globe idea doesn't come until later, and so it simply refers to the land in general. And so sometimes you see when they'll say the whole world, like in regards to the pharaohs, when they're saying that people are coming to Joseph, the whole world is coming, or the whole land, they're just coming to the land. That it's just the land that they know of. Or when it says it's a Greek in the New Testament, but we get to the New Testament, it says he's taking the census of the whole world, was the entire land that the Roman Empire is over, because that's as far as the world that they know of. It's just kind of like us. We tend to use words in a hyperbolic way and in a literal way, and sometimes they would do the same thing, or in a way that it's just a way they understand it. Biblical authors, maybe God knows. Well, God does know. God knows that the whole world is planet Earth, but he knows that they are talking about the world that they know of. But Eden was a garden on a mountain. We'll see this further when we get into the devil discussion. It's really interesting. We tend to think of Eden because it's a garden, as this little place. He's like over here on the side. No, when you read things like Ezekiel and Isaiah, they describe Eden as heaven and the garden that is on God's mountain. It is God's mountain. So if mountains are where you go to meet God, and that's where you kind of have this convenient relationship of heaven and earth together, well, the Garden of Eden is in this place where Adam and Eve were. They were in this whatever mountain it was, or whatever it means to be a mountain, because sometimes they would Israel refer to their mountain as the biggest mountain in the world, but if you look at the region around them, it wasn't the biggest mountain, but they're saying it is the greatest one because Yahweh is the one who resides over it. This is the place in which the heavenly and the earthly were together as one. Is the original ideal. Is the idea of the two being together, as the longing for in Revelation is for us to be united with the spiritual and the heavenly together. Sorry, the heavenly and the earthly together again. We tend to think of as the end of Christianity is you die and you get to go to heaven. Well, that's not the ideal that God has laid out in the gospel. He's not looking for us to just remain spiritual up there. The desire is that physical was created good. And so he's going to recreate or restore, depending on what scholar you're reading from, to bring together that relationship again of the earthly and the spiritual together as one unit, and so they can convene together. The land is also described as floating on waters below, while also held by the foundations of the world. This even makes sense with the world we live in today. We tend to think it really uncomfortable because we're reading Earth as the globe itself. Like, well, the globe doesn't have any foundations. It's spinning based on gravity. But, the land we're sitting on, it goes down somewhere, and it kind of holds us up because it's all rock, it's dirt. But also it's there in the water. But for them, it makes sense, though. It's kind of intuitive to kind of assume that because they can't see what's below the sea level. They don't have the cameras we have. They don't have the machinery to go down there. They're just seeing that there's water, and there's land that's on the water, and the water at one point covered the land. That's just all they know. And so it's this weird thing of it's very simple, but also very intuitive, also very theologically combined, because we tend to separate this whole idea. There's a supernatural and there's a natural, and say like, okay, well, here's a natural disaster, and we kind of remove any idea of supernatural. But for them, they were always influencing each other. Like we had to say sometimes in how maybe like angels might respond, or like demons might respond. And then they would also sometimes have a say in how things around us are going. Or they would tempt us to give into sin. Or obviously God getting involved and intervening, as he frequently does, to bring salvation unto humanity. Let's go to the third tier. This one is also be kind of simple, but is kind of wrapping our heads around some of the extra stuff. That's going to be probably the harder part, but it's not like it's super foreign. So the water that is below. So as we mentioned, there's several words regarding water. I was reading a book on this, and what's interesting is that you'll notice when a concept is very important for a culture, when they add more words to it. So we have a lot of words to describe time, right? We have like days, minutes, now, later, today, 5 minutes. Like we break them in chunks. But then you go over to some countries in the East, and it's just kind of like they don't care as much about the preciseness of time. We have one word for love in our country, but you go to the Greek and there's numerous words for love. You go to us, we say, well, yeah, it's water. Yeah, we categorize different kinds of water, like based on how big it is or its boundaries. But it's just like, okay, that's water. There's a sea, or an ocean when it's this big, or there's a lake when it's enclosed, or there's a pond. Or for them, it was like all that water out there. When it's on its good day, it's the Mayim. On its bad day, it's the Tahom. And it's also Yam because it's the sea and it's so big, and we have no idea what's out there. But the water that's below is the home of sea creatures, as we know from day 5, but also the sea monsters, the Tanin. Wild stuff you can get into the Tanin. Another thing we'll get into a further discussion later. Like I said, this whole opening 2 sessions we're doing really is just kind of showing all the doorways we can go down the road for. It's not meant for us to enter every doorway right away. It's just saying, look, here's all the doors because there's so much here. Leviathan is one of those. Regardless of whether we believe Leviathan literally existed or not, it was very much a device used, as well as Tanin, Rahav, all of these words to describe something that was acting out in chaos against God. This force that human beings have no ability to go against, but God does. Except in Genesis 1 and 1 Psalm, where they're there to play. It's like the Hebrews are there kind of these, like they're really calm, they're there to play. I mean, they're part of God's good creation, meaning that God did not intend for these things, like did not create a world of chaos. But the very fact that he allows things to act out is his idea of chaos. And there's this whole really interesting thing. But it's kind of interesting. They view the world, the water as unknowable. It's uncontrollable by man. I mean, like even though we have like propellers that kind of use water, like once water kind of gets rolling and there's winds involved, we're kind of like, shoot, we're screwed. Water's going to flood us, or it's going to destroy this or that. You can take a power washer and cut stuff with water, and like it's weird how much you can do with water to preserve life and also destroy life. But they didn't have the technology to control it, right? Like, and even then, we don't really have the technology to control it in some ways. But also resembles life in chaos, sometimes likened to the underworld, because if you go down far enough, you enter into the underworld. Also, underworld, it's again really intuitive. It's under the world. When you die, you go down under. So what are things down under? One, there's probably that they seem to talk about this land that's down under, but also if you go down deep in the waters, you're going down under the land. You're down under the world. So one of the words that is going to be of great significance because it's used a lot as a theological term or as a literary device is the word Tahom. Tahom is the opening description of the water in Genesis 1. So it's often translated as the deep. The Greek word is for abyss. So sometimes they'll talk about this pit or the abyss that the monster's going to come out of. Well, if you put that in Hebrew words, it's the deep. The deep, the chaos waters. Out from the waters comes these monsters. Out from the pit comes the devil, because it's playing off of this cosmology, but is using the Greek words or using the Septuagint. Because they're often when your New Testament authors are quoting, they're quoting from the Septuagint. That's why you're like, wait, that doesn't quite read the same. It's the Septuagint. They're technically quoting, not the Hebrew. And even if they were quoting the Hebrew, they would still have to translate it into Greek. That's the Greek equivalent. And so the water that prevents order when let out of control, as we see with the flood, as we see with Moses describing the Red Sea as we know it, with the Egyptians crossing over. It says the Tahom collapsed on them. It was viewed as that the waters decreated the Egyptian army, or the flood decreated, or the earth is not created yet. We don't have a place to live yet, so the water has to be dealt with. But then a sentence later, it's then turned to the word Mayim, because with God hovering over it, the sea, the deep, is nothing to him. It's not a problem for him. But it's the water that exists prior to day 1. It's one of the things that must be dealt with in the first 3 days in order for him to do with the second 3 days. The only one who can control the waters ultimately is God.